Hi, my name is Lily, and I create videos about life with a disability. My disability, Friedreich Ataxia, affects my speech, as you've likely already noticed. So my last video was pretty serious, and this time I wanted to do something kind of fun, kind of funny. So here's a good old story time. And in some ways, it's not really that funny. This story is actually pretty indicative of some serious theological questions like, why does God allow good people to suffer? Or why does God allow pain and evil in the world? Or can all obstacles and pains just be obliterated by a strong enough faith? Etc., etc. Though this story isn't really funny, I think having a flexible sense of humor, kind of ironic, kind of dark, kind of twisted, it helps you to cope with a lot of dark-ish. So without further ado, let's just dive on into it. So when I was in high school 10-ish years ago, I was a scene kid.
Roar means I love you in dinosaur.
I was into pop-punk music, Screamo music, every flavor of the scene, if you will. My high school boyfriend and I were both scene kids, and we were also church kids. So we were into all the Christian Screamo bands of the time, and one of them was For Today. I was so into this band that I got lyrics of one of their songs tattooed on my back. Truth is all we have in a world of deception. So during my senior year of high school, they were gonna come and play in a town nearby, and of course it was super exciting. So we packed up a couple friends and we headed to the show. As time passes, you forget some of those finer details of things, but I remember images of things here and there, like waiting in line for the venue, being packed inside the venue like sardines, and being pretty close to the stage. I also remember my boyfriend's brother and his brother's friend taking off their shirts and then standing next to each other with their arms around each other's shoulders, smiling real big, taking a picture, and it was just so random that it was hilarious. And I remember how the lead singer, Motionless in White, looked like a more beautiful version of Marilyn Manson. And I remember feeling my spirit soar as the lead singer of For Today, Maddie Montgomery, screamed Christian lyrics in the microphone, and the entire crowd was moshing and jumping and singing the lyrics with him. Anyways, we're there, we see the whole show, it's sweaty, it's fun, yada yada, the show's over. I really don't know how all these events unfolded, and I imagine that my high school boyfriend must have been doing this with the intention of getting everyone to pray for me. So I don't remember how, but we end up backstage with a kind of random group of people. We're with the guitarist of the band, Mike Reynolds. We're with this random girl groupie person who I don't know where she came from, but I think she was just a fan, and I think that Maddie's wife was back there with us. So at this time, I had been diagnosed with FA for about a year, and I was still walking around unassisted, but it was pretty noticeable that there was something off about me. So Mike asked me what my condition was called, and I told him, Friedreich's Ataxia. I kid you not, he responds and says, Friedreich's Ataxia. Friedreich's Ataxia. It's like there's a demon called Friedreich attacking you, which is kind of true. It's slightly amusing. He might not have said the part about the demon being named Friedreich, but I know that he pointed out the Ataxia part. So anyway, that was slightly amusing, but then the next part was definitely not amusing. He proceeds to tell me that a loving father, aka God, would not give bad gifts to his children. So FA is basically this demonic force that has got a hold of me and is attacking me, and we need to petition to the Father to get rid of it. And the random groupie girl threw in that she had been at a For Today show, and she was on crutches, and at some point she actually was able to throw down the crutches and just walk without them. So I'm like, okay, wow, well,
Let's go then.
we get in a circle to pray, and we got our eyes closed, and Mike is standing next to me, and he starts praying, loud and hard and fast for God to heal me of this thing. And it might sound silly, and I don't know, looking back on it, it does seem kind of silly, but in the moment, I was concentrating with every fiber of my being, trying so hard to believe that God really was going to miraculously heal me of FA right there on the spot. So, as you can imagine, it was a little awkward when the prayer ended, and you guessed it, I still had FA. And Mike actually asked me, "Do you feel any different?" And it was so incredibly uncomfortable, and I was like,
I don't know.
and that was pretty much the climax or the anticlimax of the story, because after that, he told me to just keep having faith and keep praying that God would heal me. And then we all just talked for a while and eventually parted ways. So here's where I get into discussing A, the bad theology that Mike was pushing on me, B, some of the things that have come out about them in the time since, and C, just my final thoughts in general. Just popping in to say that I'm pretty harsh throughout this video, and I feel that I should be fair and at least point out that it is kind that, after a band would play a show, that they would meet with any of the fans and pray for them. I do think their heart was in the right place. I just think that they unfortunately believe some things that I think are wrong and hurtful. So I think a good analogy might be how when a woman is sexually assaulted, sometimes it takes her years to come to grips with that because she spent so long blaming herself, or for thinking I kind of knew what I was getting into, or for thinking like, oh, if I'd really wanted him to stop, I could have probably stopped him, so was it really assault? And it takes a while to work through that and realize, wow, I was assaulted. Well, that's kind of how it was with this story, because the true effed upness of what happened didn't sink in for years. Because I was still in love with them when I left the show as much as when I went, and I was so honored that Mike had prayed over me, and I even got my tattoo after that happened. Now that I'm older and have more life experience, I can really appreciate how messed up that theology is. Because essentially it's the prosperity gospel. In that moment, Mike basically said, if you pray and have enough faith, you will be cured of your disease. And that reflects the prosperity gospel, because the prosperity gospel preaches that health and wealth are what you can expect from God if you're a good and faithful servant. If you're not healthy and you're not wealthy, then maybe you should try a little harder. Maybe you should be a better Christian. If you were to follow that line of logic to its furthest extent, then essentially it'd be saying that no one has enough faith because no one's life is perfect, and you could say that any perfection in anyone's life could be taken care of if only they had enough faith and prayed hard enough. The logic of it just does not map out. Not to mention that it's not at all biblical. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor." Jesus uplifted the marginalized, the outcast, the needy, the lonely, the disenfranchised. The Apostle Paul writes in 2 Corinthians that he prayed that God would remove the thorn from his side, but God said, "My grace is sufficient for you." Are we going to argue that the Apostle Paul did not have enough faith to be healed? I could go on, but you get the idea. And not only is it unbiblical and bad theology, but it's cruel theology. It's cruel to look at a person who has to deal with the obstacles and the struggles of disability day in and day out, to look at that person and to say, you could be rid of this if only you prayed enough and had enough faith. So not only do I have to deal with being disabled, but I have to deal with people implying that I'm disabled somehow by my own fault. So now I want to say just a few words on what they've been up to since this happened. This happened in 2011, and the band for today broke up in 2016. And apparently Matty Montgomery went off and started his own church called The Altar in Tennessee. So this is all alleged, don't come after me, but I knew someone in real life who actually moved to Tennessee to intern at their church. I don't know all the details of what happened, but essentially it was an epic disaster and they screwed him over and he ended up being homeless for a while. And the guy was saying all this stuff about the church, like that they hung on every word that Maddie said, that it was a little bit cultish. Yikes. Again, that's completely alleged. And a few years ago, Maddie made this social media post that, of course, was very controversial. It was condemning LGBT people, and at one point he wrote in there that the reason that he married his wife was to serve God, implying, I guess, that if you're a gay person, you should not marry the person you love. You should marry someone of the opposite sex, even if you don't love them, because serving God is more important. I call big time BS on that, because what Maddie is kind of implying is like, well, actually, my wife is ugly and smelly and boring, but God wanted me to be with her, so it had to be. Keep it 100, Maddie. You love your wife. You're in love with your wife. You're sexually attracted to your wife. You're spiritually, mentally, emotionally compatible with your wife. You did not marry your wife just to serve God. You married your wife because you chose your wife. But you don't think LGBT people should get to choose the one that they love, the one that they want to be with.
If you were to say in the Bible, well, white men have to drink their pee every other day, or white men can't marry. Well, I wouldn't like that, but I would do it because he is God. You know, coming from a place of, if I'm single for the rest of my life, it's not the biggest issue.
It's the standard BS you hear from people that kind of think this way, that, you know, you can be gay, hate for seeing with the same type of mentality where you're like, it's fine if you're gay, just don't ever
Yeah.
Just that simple.
No, I really do think any straight person has a lot of audacity to say, hypothetically, in some world that does not exist, that will frankly never exist, if I weren't allowed to meet and fall in love with Sutton and actually be with her because I love her, I would be fine with that because God is asking me to. It is not fair to ever assume he would be okay with that. And frankly, I think he should sit with that statement and figure out whether or not that's actually true.
Ironically, I found out in my brief amount of research that Mike was actually ousted from the band for also making similar homophobic comments, which is very confusing to me. Why was it fine for the lead singer to make homophobic comments, but when the guitarist made comments similar, he was kicked out of the band? Who knows? Point being, I'm not really their biggest fan anymore. Our interpretations of how we should live out our faith are probably pretty far apart. And just for the record, I don't regret my tattoo because I still like what it says and like the way it looks and everything. Just not a big fan of the band anymore. So final thoughts. Unfortunately, that is not the first time or the last time that someone would pray for my healing. Oftentimes, it is unsolicited and pretty uncomfortable. For instance, a few months ago, I went out to eat and the cashier literally walked around the register and just put her hands on me and starts praying, Jesus, Jesus! Oh, the joys of being in a wheelchair. But it is kind of sad that to a lot of people, the idea of being physically disabled is really and truly the worst outcome that a person could have in their life. And that is so not true, people. Yeah, I'm disabled. I have a condition that affects me every second of every day forever. But you know what else? I'm very privileged, I'm very happy, I'm very joyful, and those things are not mutually exclusive from being disabled. If you want to pray for my physical well-being, then yeah, go ahead and pray for a cure. Although, don't just pray for a cure for me, pray for a cure in the form of a treatment or something that can help all FA people. And also pray for me that I'll continue to be strong mentally and physically to fight this disease. And if you're gonna pray for me, then you might as well also pray for my mental health and my spiritual development and my life path and my relationships and, all the other things about a person that probably matter a lot more than the physical state of their body. So yeah, that's the story of the time a Christian Screamo band tried to heal me of my disability, along with some of my random thoughts and reflections. Hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for sticking around to this point. And go ahead and throw me a like and subscribe to my channel. It helps a lot. Otherwise, hope you have a great day and God bless you all.